I was standing in my bathroom adjusting my tie in the mirror, getting ready to drive to my daughter's house for what I believed was a simple birthday dinner. Everything felt normal, comfortable. Then my phone buzzed. It wasn't my daughter. It was a message from someone at the medical clinic we'd visited together. Just one line, "Do not go to dinner tonight. Come see me immediately. Please trust me." I got in my car to find out if she was telling the truth. What she showed me shattered everything I believed about my own family. Welcome to Dad Revenge. I truly appreciate you being here and choosing to watch this story today. If you're still with me, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. Also, please keep in mind, parts of this story are fictional, shaped for entertainment and educational value. Any similarities to real people or places are coincidental, but the lesson it carries is worth paying attention to. Everything started from a simple choice that Thursday afternoon, burgundy or charcoal gray. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, holding two ties up to my collar, trying to remember which color Brenda said she preferred. The October light filtered through the frosted window, casting soft shadows across the small room that smelled faintly of Old Spice and the lavender soap Daphne used to buy in bulk from that boutique on Capitol Hill. Burgundy felt too formal for a family birthday dinner. Charcoal gray it was. I was halfway through the Windsor knot muscle memory from 40 years of wearing a tie to work when my phone buzzed on the granite countertop. The vibration sent it skittering toward the edge, and I caught it just before it tumbled into the sink. My heart did that little skip. It always does when something moves too fast. A reminder I'm 72 now, not 32. The screen showed a text message from an unknown number. Area code 206, local at least. I tapped it open, expecting spam about extended car warranties or solar panel installations. Instead, I read, "Mr. Hartley, this is Susan Mitchell, RN, at Evergreen Medical Clinic. Your daughter Brenda picked up a prescription for sedatives yesterday. The pharmacy notes say, crush into food. Please do not go to tonight's dinner. Come to room 3 at the clinic immediately. This is urgent. Your life may depend on it." I read it again, then a third time. The words didn't make sense. They couldn't be real. Brenda wouldn't. No, that's ridiculous. My daughter, who used to bring me breakfast in bed on Father's Day, who cried when we had to put down our old golden retriever, Max, who texted me every Sunday without fail to check in, she wouldn't hurt me. But nurses don't send messages like this as jokes. My hands started to shake. The phone felt suddenly heavy, like it was made of lead instead of glass and silicone. I set it down on the counter and gripped the edge of the sink, staring at my reflection. The same face I'd seen for 7 decades looked back at me, the gray stubble I'd missed shaving this morning, the crow's feet that deepened when I smiled, the Navy anchor tattoo on my forearm that had faded to blue-gray. I looked old, vulnerable, the kind of man someone might think they could get away with hurting. "Stop it," I told myself. "This is paranoia talking. Brenda loves you, but then why would a nurse send this message?" I picked up the phone again and scrolled to Brenda's contact. Her profile picture taken last Christmas, her smile wide and genuine, Patrick's arm around her shoulders, seemed to mock me. Could someone who looked that happy be planning something so horrible? The rational part of my brain, the engineer who spent 30 years designing bridges and calculating load-bearing weights, kicked in. I needed more information. I needed to talk to this Susan Mitchell person and figure out what was really going on. My thumb hovered over Brenda's name. I could call her right now, ask her directly. But if this nurse was telling the truth, calling Brenda would alert her. And if she really had picked up sedatives with instructions to crush them into my food, a memory surfaced unbidden, Daphne's voice, tired but firm, saying, "Scott, sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we understand least." She'd said that 3 years ago during one of our last conversations before she passed. We'd been talking about Brenda's marriage, about how Patrick seemed charming, but something felt off. Daphne had been sick then, too sick to articulate exactly what bothered her, but I'd seen the worry in her eyes. I'd dismissed it. Patrick was fine? Brenda was happy? Everything was fine. Was it though? I thought about the last few months. Brenda's phone calls had become less frequent, her visits shorter. When she did come over, she seemed distracted, checking her phone constantly. Patrick rarely accompanied her anymore, always citing work obligations. And last month, when I'd offered to help them with some financial difficulties, I'd overheard them discussing. Brenda had gotten defensive, almost angry. "We're handling it, Dad," she'd snapped. "We don't need your money." I'd chalked it up to pride. Now I wondered if there was something darker underneath. The phone was still in my hand. The message still glowed on the screen, those terrible words refusing to disappear. "Your life may depend on it." I sat down on the edge of the bathtub, suddenly exhausted. The charcoal gray tie hung loose around my neck, unfinished. Through the bathroom door, I could see my bedroom, the bed I'd shared with Daphne for 45 years. The dresser topped with family photos. The comfortable predictability of a life well lived. A life someone might want to end early. Number 1. I shook my head, trying to clear it. This was crazy. There had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe this Susan Mitchell had mixed up patient files. Maybe someone was pranking me. Maybe. But the message had used my name, and Brenda's name, and mentioned Evergreen Medical Clinic, where Brenda had taken me for a checkup just 2 months ago. Too many details to be random. Too specific to be a mistake. I stood up, my knees protesting slightly, and looked at myself in the mirror one more time. The man staring back at me had survived boot camp at 18, a deployment in the Gulf, the death of his wife, and 7 decades of life's regular curveballs. He was not going to die from a crushed sedative in his birthday dinner mashed potatoes without asking some hard questions first. I unlocked my phone and opened the message again. Below the text was a phone number. Not Brenda's. The nurse's, presumably. For a long moment, I just stood there, thumb hovering over the call button. Making this call would change everything. It would mean accepting that something might be terribly wrong, that my daughter, my only child, might be someone I didn't know at all. But not making the call might mean, what, eating dinner at Brenda's house? Complimenting her cooking? Waking up dead? The thought was so absurd, it almost made me laugh. Almost. I pressed the call button. The phone rang once. Twice. Then a woman's voice, breathless and urgent, answered. "Shut, Mr. Hartley, thank God you called. We don't have much time." I'd driven the 15 minutes from my house to Evergreen Medical in a daze, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my mind spinning through every possible explanation for that text message. By the time I pulled into the parking lot, I'd convinced myself 3 times that this was all a misunderstanding, and 3 times talked myself back into walking through those glass doors. Now I stood outside room 3, staring at the brass number plate like it might offer me some kind of guidance. Through the frosted window panel, I could see a figure moving inside, small, efficient movements that suggested someone who'd spent years working in tight medical spaces. I knocked twice. The door opened immediately. "Mr. Hartley." The woman who stood before me was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-40s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and eyes that looked like they'd seen too many late shifts. Her scrubs were navy blue with small stethoscope patterns, and she held a manila folder against her chest like a shield. "I'm Susan Mitchell. Thank you for coming. I don't understand what's happening," I said, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. "Your message said..." "Please." She gestured to a chair beside a small exam table. "Sit down. I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to see something." I sat. The vinyl chair creaked under my weight. Susan pulled up a rolling stool and positioned herself directly across from me, close enough that I could see the worry lines etched around her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands as she opened the folder. "2 days ago," she began, "your daughter Brenda came to this clinic for a prescription refill. I wasn't her assigned nurse, but I happened to be at the pharmacy counter when she picked up the medication. She pulled out a photocopied prescription form and laid it on the exam table between us. This is what she filled. I leaned forward, squinting at the small print. Lorazepam, 20 milligrams, 30 tablets. Brenda's signature at the bottom, her looping handwriting, unmistakable, the same signature I'd seen on birthday cards and Christmas presents for 40 years. Lorazepam is a sedative. Susan continued, her voice professionally calm, but her eyes watching me carefully. It's commonly prescribed for anxiety. There's nothing unusual about the prescription itself. What caught my attention was this. She pointed to a handwritten note in the pharmacy instructions section: crush into food for easier administration. The words hit me like a physical blow. Crush into food, I repeated numbly. Why would... That notation isn't from the doctor or the pharmacist, Susan interrupted. It's from the patient. Your daughter specifically requested those instructions. She told our pharmacy tech that you had trouble swallowing pills. She paused. Do you have trouble swallowing pills, Mr. Hartley? No. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. I take my blood pressure medication every morning. I've never had trouble swallowing pills. Susan nodded slowly, like she'd expected that answer. I thought that might be the case. Mr. Hartley, I need to tell you something, and it's not going to be easy to hear. She took a breath, seeming to steady herself. 3 years ago, I lost my mother. She was 78, living with my brother and his wife in Spokane. For months, she'd been complaining of confusion, dizziness, memory problems. We thought it was dementia. Her voice cracked slightly. It wasn't dementia. My sister-in-law had been giving her sedatives crushed into her morning oatmeal. By the time we figured it out, my mother had signed over her house, her savings, everything. She died 6 months later in a state facility. The room felt suddenly airless. Why are you telling me this? Because I've seen this pattern before. Susan pulled another document from the folder. This one looked official, with a medical practice letterhead. Your daughter's husband, Patrick Walsh, is a patient here. He sees Dr. Kenneth Graves for... She hesitated, choosing her words carefully, for stress management. Dr. Graves is what we call a generous prescriber. He's also Patrick's golf buddy at Broadmoor Golf Club. Last month, I overheard them discussing some financial difficulties Patrick was having. Something about needing money quickly to cover gambling debts. My chest tightened. How much money? I don't know the specifics, but Patrick mentioned a timeline: 2 weeks to pay someone back, or there would be consequences. She met my eyes. Mr. Hartley, your daughter picked up that sedative prescription 2 days ago. Your birthday dinner is tonight. The timing is not a coincidence. I finished the engineer in me connecting the dots, even as my heart tried to reject the entire equation. Susan leaned back slightly, giving me space to process. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that distinctive medical office pallor that made everyone look slightly ill. Through the thin walls, I could hear the murmur of voices from other exam rooms, the ding of an elevator, the ordinary sounds of a healthcare facility, where ordinary people dealt with ordinary problems. Nothing about this was ordinary. There's more, Susan said quietly. She reached into the folder one last time and pulled out what looked like medication records, my name printed across the top in bold letters. Last month, when you came in for your regular checkup, Brenda accompanied you. According to our records, she picked up your prescription refills from our pharmacy. Do you remember what you were prescribed? I tried to think back. The appointment had been routine blood pressure check, cholesterol, screening the usual questions about diet and exercise. Just my regular medications. Lisinopril for blood pressure. Susan's finger traced down the document. According to our pharmacy records, Brenda also picked up a bottle of multivitamins. She told the tech they were a gift for you, extra strength to help with energy levels. She looked up. Did you receive those vitamins? Yes. A cold sensation began spreading through my chest. She brought them over the next day, told me they'd help me feel more alert. I've been taking one every morning with breakfast. Susan pushed the paper across the table toward me. Her hand was steady, but her voice caught slightly when she spoke. Mr. Hartley, those vitamins weren't vitamins. You've been taking low-dose sedatives every morning for the past 2 months. 2 months. The words echoed in my head as I stared at the paper in front of me. Week by week, the memories came flooding back, now tinted by the truth I'd been too trusting to see. Mr. Hartley. Susan's voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. Are you all right? I wasn't all right. I was trying to reconcile the daughter I thought I knew with the person who'd been systematically poisoning me for 8 weeks. My hands gripped the edge of the exam table, the vinyl cool under my palms, anchoring me to the present, while my mind spiraled backward through the past 2 months. Week -8. Mid-August. I'd been in the garage organizing my toolbox, something I did every few months, a habit from my Navy days. Brenda had stopped by unannounced, which wasn't unusual. What was unusual was her concern. "Dad, you look pale," she'd said, her brow furrowed in that worried way she'd inherited from her mother. "When was your last checkup?" "April, maybe. I'm fine, honey. Just been working outside a lot. I'd been refinishing the deck, spending long days in the summer sun. That's 5 months ago. You're 72, Dad. You need to be more careful about your health." She'd pulled out her phone, scrolling through something. "Dr. Graves has an opening next week. I'll make you an appointment." I'd laughed it off, told her I'd schedule my own appointments, but she'd been insistent. Pushy even. At the time, I'd thought it was touching my daughter caring about my health. Now, replaying the conversation in my head, I heard something different in her tone. Urgency. Determination. Planning. Week -6. Early September. Dr. Kenneth Graves's office had been nicer than my usual physician's wood paneling leather chairs, a view of the Sound. Dr. Graves himself was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-50s with perfect teeth and a golf tan. He'd shaken my hand with the kind of firm grip that felt rehearsed. "Scott, good to meet you. Brenda's told me so much about you." He'd smiled, settling behind his desk. Navy veteran engineer, built half the bridges in this state. Impressive resume. The appointment had been quick. Blood pressure normal. Heart rate fine. Dr. Graves had asked a few questions about sleep, energy levels, stress. Standard stuff. Then, at the end, he'd written something on his prescription pad. "I'm going to give you some supplements," he'd said, tearing off the sheet. "Multivitamins, omega-3s, CoQ10. Good for cardiovascular health at your age. Brenda can pick them up from our pharmacy downstairs. It'll be easier than going to Save More." I'd thanked him, thinking nothing of it. Why would I? He was a doctor. Brenda had recommended him. Everything seemed legitimate. I hadn't known he was Patrick's golf buddy. Hadn't known he had a reputation for writing prescriptions that skirted the line between legal and questionable. Hadn't known the supplements he'd given me were actually low-dose sedatives designed to make me appear confused and forgetful. Week -4. Late September. That's when the problems started. I'd misplaced my car keys 3 times in 1 week. Found them in strange places: the refrigerator, the garage freezer, my bedroom dresser drawer. Each time I'd stood there, keys in hand, trying to remember putting them there, and coming up empty. Then there were the appointments I'd forgotten. My neighbor Frank had stopped by one morning, confused about why I'd missed our standing breakfast at the diner. "We meet every Tuesday at 8, Scott. You feeling okay?" I'd felt fine. But I'd also completely forgotten about Tuesday breakfast. The days started blurring together. I'd check the calendar in the morning, certain it was Wednesday, only to discover it was Friday. Simple tasks took longer. I'd walk into a room and forget why I'd gone there. My daughter had noticed, of course. "Dad, you seem off lately," Brenda had said one afternoon, her voice laced with concern that now felt performative. "Are you sleeping okay? Eating enough?" I'm fine. I'd insisted, even though I wasn't sure if I was fine. Just getting older, I guess. Maybe you should see Dr. Graves again, she'd suggested. Get some blood work done. Rule out any deficiencies. I'd declined. I'd already seen him once started taking his supplements. Whatever I was experiencing, I'd figured it would pass. It didn't pass. It got worse. Week -2. Early October, the phone call. I'd been trying to schedule an appointment with my accountant about my annual tax review. Simple enough, I'd called his office number, left a message. Or at least I thought I had. Brenda had been visiting that afternoon, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop, while I made the call from the living room. "Hi, this is Scott Hartley," I'd said to the voicemail. "I need to set up a meeting about... The words had slipped away like trying to grab water. About the year thing. The tax year. No, wait. The review thing. For taxes. Can you call me back?" I'd hung up, frustrated with myself. Through the doorway, I'd seen Brenda watching me, her phone in her hand, positioned like she'd been recording. At the time, I'd thought nothing of it. Now, sitting in Susan's exam room, I realized exactly what she'd been doing. She'd been collecting evidence, recording her father's sedative-induced confusion to build a case for incompetence, to prove I couldn't manage my own affairs, to justify taking control of everything I owned. "The symptoms you experienced," Susan said gently, pulling me back to the present. "They're all consistent with regular sedative use. Memory problems, confusion, difficulty with routine tasks. To someone who didn't know you were being drugged, you would have appeared to be developing dementia or cognitive decline. In evidence." I said the word, tasting bitter. "She was building evidence," Susan nodded. "For what's called a conservatorship hearing. If she could prove you were mentally incompetent, she could gain legal control over your finances, your property, your medical decisions, everything." My hands clenched into fists. 40 years of raising that girl. Teaching her to ride a bike, helping with homework, walking her down the aisle at her wedding. 40 years of love and trust and sacrifice. And she'd repaid me by turning me into a project, a problem, to be solved, an obstacle between her husband and whatever money they thought I had. The anger that rose in my chest was unlike anything I'd felt before. Not the hot, explosive kind, but something cold and calculated. The kind of anger an engineer feels when a bridge fails inspection. Methodical, analytical, focused on finding every point of weakness in the structure. "To Mr. Hartley." Susan's voice cut through my thoughts, steady but urgent. "What they gave you before was bad. What they're planning for tonight is worse. Much worse." Susan's next words felt like a punch to the gut. "The sedatives in tonight's dessert chocolate cake, according to the dinner invitation Brenda sent our pharmacy, will be triple the dose you've been taking daily." She pulled out a calculator from her desk drawer, her fingers moving quickly across the keys. "See, based on your weight, 75 kilograms, and your age, that amount will cause respiratory depression within 45 minutes of ingestion. Possibly cardiac arrest." The clinical terms washed over me like ice water. Respiratory depression, cardiac arrest. She was describing my death with the same matter-of-fact tone I'd used when calculating structural loads on bridge designs. "They'll wait," Susan continued, her voice dropping. "Let you eat dessert, have coffee, maybe watch you get drowsy. They'll attribute it to your condition, the dementia they've been staging for 2 months. By the time they call 911, it'll be too late. The medical examiner will see an elderly man with documented cognitive decline who accidentally overdosed on prescription medication. The case will be closed within a week." My knuckles went white, gripping the exam table. "Why are you telling me this? How do you even know about tonight's dosage?" Susan's jaw tightened. "Because I processed the pharmacy orders. When Patrick called yesterday to confirm the prescription was ready, he asked our tech Marcy, who's worked here for 20 years, if the amount we discussed with Dr. Graves's would be sufficient for tonight's purpose. Marcy thought he was talking about pain management for a chronic condition. I knew better. She reached into her folder again and pulled out a printout looked like a credit check or financial record. I also did some checking after our last conversation. This is public record from King County Court. Your son-in-law has 3 civil judgments against him, totaling $47,000. But that's just what's official. The real problem is Marco Rossi, who... Marco Rossi runs a private lending operation out of Tukwila. He's been under FBI investigation for years, but they can't make anything stick. Patrick borrowed $400,000 from him 6 months ago. The word around certain circles, I have a cousin who works in debt collection, is that Rossi gave Patrick a deadline. 2 weeks from today. If Patrick doesn't pay, there will be consequences. $400,000. The number seemed impossible. How do you gamble away that kind of money? Online poker mostly. Some sports betting. Patrick's been frequenting a private casino in Renton that operates just under the legal radar. He's what they call a whale, a high-stakes loser who keeps coming back. Susan's expression was grim. Your house is worth $870,000, Mr. Hartley. No mortgage. I checked the county assessor's records. You also have a life insurance policy through Navy Federal Credit Union, $250,000. Brenda is listed as the sole beneficiary. My mind did the math automatically. $870,000 plus $250,000. Over $1 million. More than enough to pay off a loan shark and have plenty left over. More than enough to make murder worthwhile. The timeline fits. I said, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. Patrick needs the money in 2 weeks. If I die tonight, Brenda inherits everything. The life insurance pays out within 30 days, typically. The house can be sold quickly if they price it right, especially in this market. Exactly. Susan leaned forward. Mr. Hartley, I need you to understand something. This isn't just financial desperation. This is a calculated plan involving at least 3 people, your daughter, your son-in-law, and Dr. Graves. They've been working on this for months. The sedatives, the staged confusion, the documented decline. It's all designed to make tonight's death look natural, even expected. A strange calm settled over me. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was that part of my brain that had spent decades solving complex engineering problems. The part that didn't panic when a bridge inspection revealed structural weaknesses, just calculated what needed to be done to fix it. I'd spent 8 weeks being slowly drugged into appearing incompetent. 8 weeks watching my daughter build a case against my mental fitness while poisoning me. 8 weeks being treated like a problem to be solved, rather than a person to be loved. But I'd also spent 4 years in the Navy learning how to respond to threats. 30 years as an engineer learning how to analyze systems and find their weak points. 72 years learning that sometimes the best defense is a good offense. You can't go to that dinner, Susan said, urgently gripping my arm. Mr. Hartley, if you walk into that house tonight, you might not walk back out. I stood up feeling decades of military training crystallizing into a cold, clear purpose. Yes, I can, and I will, but not as a victim. In the parking lot, under fluorescent lights that made the October evening feel harsh and clinical. Susan handed me something no bigger than a shirt button. It's a recording device, she said, her voice low despite the empty lot around us. Video and audio. My ex-husband used to work private security. He left a box of equipment when he moved out. This one clips under your shirt right here. She tapped the center of her chest. The lens is pinhole-sized. Nobody will notice it unless they're specifically looking. I turned the tiny device over in my palm. Matte black plastic barely weighing an ounce. In my Navy days, surveillance equipment had been bulky, obvious. This looked like it belonged in a spy movie. How long does it record? I'm 4 hours on a full charge. I charged it this afternoon. Susan pulled out her phone, tapped the screen a few times. It connects to this app via Bluetooth. I can monitor the feed from my phone. If something goes wrong, if you're in immediate danger, I'll call 911 immediately. And if things go according to their plan, I asked. If they succeed in, I couldn't quite say the words, killing me, murdering me, making it look like an accident, Susan's jaw tightened. If I don't hear from you by 8:30, I'm calling Detective Michael Torres. He's Seattle PD, works the Fraud and Elder Abuse Division. We've collaborated on cases before. He's one of the good ones, he'll respond fast. 8:30. That gave me an hour and 15 minutes at dinner before the cavalry arrived. Assuming I was still conscious. Assuming I was still alive. Or here's what you need to do. Susan continued shifting into what sounded like a well-rehearsed briefing. Act normal when you arrive. Hug Brenda, shake Patrick's hand, compliment the house. Play the role they expect, the slightly confused elderly father who's been having memory issues. They've been staging that narrative for 2 months. Give them what they want. Until dessert, I said. Until dessert. When they bring out the cake, you need to avoid eating it. Spill your coffee on it, claim you're too full, suddenly need to use the bathroom, whatever works. The important thing is that you don't ingest whatever they've put in that cake. I thought about the logistics. Brenda knew I never turned down chocolate cake. It was my favorite, had been since childhood. She'd weaponized that knowledge, turned a simple pleasure into a murder weapon. The thought made something cold and hard settle in my chest. What if they insist? I asked. What if they physically try to make me eat it? Then you have it on video. Attempted murder caught on camera. Torres will have everything he needs for arrest warrants. Susan met my eyes. But Mr. Hartley, you need to understand something. Once you walk into that house, you're in enemy territory. If they realize you're onto them, if they panic, things could escalate quickly. You need to stay calm, stay in character, and get out as soon as you can. Enemy territory. The phrase triggered something in my brain muscle memory from decades ago, when I'd been a 22-year-old sailor preparing for deployment to the Gulf. We'd done briefings just like this. Mission parameters, extraction points, contingency plans. I'd been trained for this, I realized. Not this exact scenario, obviously, but the mindset. The ability to compartmentalize fear and focus on the objective. To walk into a dangerous situation with a clear head and a plan. Show me how to attach the camera, I said. Susan demonstrated clipping the device to the underside of my shirt's third button, down adjusting the angle slightly. The lens needs a clear view. Don't hunch forward, that'll point it at the table. Keep your posture natural, maybe lean back slightly when you're sitting. That'll capture faces and actions. I pulled my jacket on, checked myself in my truck's side mirror. The camera was completely invisible, just looked like a regular shirt button. Test it, Susan said, holding up her phone. On the screen, I could see myself a clear, stable image despite the dim parking lot lighting. Say something. Testing 1, 2, 3, I said, feeling slightly ridiculous. Susan nodded, satisfied. Video and audio both crystal clear. You're set. She paused, seemed to struggle with something. Mr. Hartley, you don't have to do this. We can go to the police right now with what we have. The prescription records, the pharmacy instructions, my testimony about the conversation I overheard. It might be enough to start an investigation. Might be, I repeated. But probably wouldn't be enough to convict. They'd lawyer up, claim misunderstanding, produce character witnesses. Brenda would cry on the stand, say she was just trying to help her confused father. I shook my head. No. I need proof. I need them on video showing their intent carrying out their plan. Susan nodded slowly. Then good luck. And remember 8:30. If I don't hear from you, Torres gets the call. I climbed into my truck, a 15-year-old Ford F-150 that had seen better days but still ran like a dream. The engine turned over immediately, that familiar rumble vibrating through the steering wheel. Reliable. Steady. Like me, I supposed. 75 minutes until dinner. 75 minutes to drive across Town Park in Brenda's driveway, walk up to her door like I'd done 100 times before. 75 minutes to prepare myself to look my daughter in the eye and pretend I didn't know she was planning to kill me. I adjusted the rearview mirror, caught my own reflection. The same face I'd seen this afternoon, but different somehow. The confusion was gone. The fear was gone. In their place was something harder, something colder. A Navy veteran coming out of retirement for one last mission. I started the engine. The old Ford rumbled to life, solid and dependable. It was time to see what kind of person my daughter really was. Seattle looked beautiful in the October twilight. The kind of evening that makes you grateful to be alive. The irony wasn't lost on me. I took the long way to Brenda's house, down Aurora Avenue past Green Lake, where families were finishing evening walks with their dogs, then west toward Fremont. Traffic was light for a Thursday. Most people were already home, sitting down to dinner with their families. Normal families. Families where daughters didn't poison their fathers. The sunset painted the sky in amber, and Rose the Space Needle silhouetted against the fading light, like a promise that tomorrow would come. Except for me, tomorrow might not come at all. Not unless everything went according to plan tonight. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text from Susan, camera feed clear. I'm watching. Be safe. I didn't respond. Safer to keep my hands on the wheel, my eyes on the road. My mind focused on the mission ahead. But memory has a way of demanding attention, especially when you're driving toward what might be your last dinner with your only child. Brenda had been 7 when I taught her to ride a bike. It was a Sunday afternoon in late spring, one of those rare Seattle days that makes you forget the rain. We'd been in the driveway of our old house in Ballard, the one we sold after Daphne passed, the one that held 45 years of our lives. I'm scared, Daddy. Brenda had said, her small hands gripping the handlebars so tightly, her knuckles went white. I've got you, sweetheart. I'd promised, one hand on the seat, the other on the handlebars, running alongside her as she pedaled. I won't let go. She'd wobbled, nearly fallen twice, but I kept my promise. I didn't let go until she was ready, until she found her balance and pedaled away from me, her laughter floating back on the spring breeze. I won't let go. When had she let go of me? The traffic light at Fremont turned red. I stopped watching a young couple cross the street, hand in hand, laughing about something trivial. They reminded me of Brenda and Patrick on their wedding day, October 15th, 14 years ago today. I hadn't realized it was their anniversary until just now. Maybe that was why they'd chosen tonight. A birthday dinner on their anniversary. Or maybe it was simply efficient. 2 milestones, 1 outcome. Daphne had cried during the ceremony. Happy tears, she insisted later, but I'd seen something else in her eyes when she watched Patrick move through the crowd with effortless charm. He seems nice, she'd whispered to me during the reception. But there's something I can't explain. Cold feet, I'd said. You're losing your baby girl. Maybe. But her expression said she wasn't convinced. The light turned green. I drove on, crossing the Fremont Bridge, not one I'd designed, but one I'd consulted on years ago. The structure was solid. It would outlast all of us. That's what good engineering does. It builds things that endure. What kind of legacy was I leaving behind? A daughter who saw me as a bank account. A son-in-law who saw me as leverage. A granddaughter who, Olivia, she'd been born on a Tuesday morning in April, 3 weeks early, and screaming. Brenda had been exhausted, but glowing, looking up at me from the hospital bed, with that same mix of pride and vulnerability I remembered from her childhood. Do you want to hold her, Dad? I'd taken Olivia carefully, this tiny life weighing barely 6 pounds, her fists curled against her chest. She fit perfectly in the crook of my arm. You're going to be a wonderful mother, I'd told Brenda, just like yours. Olivia would be at dinner tonight. The realization hit me hard. Would they do this in front of her? Would she sit at the table while I ate poisoned cake unaware of what was happening? Or worse, would she know? Number 1, I refused that thought. Olivia was a good kid. Smart, curious kind. Daphne's eyes. My stubborn chin. She'd visited me just last month, helped me clean the garage, told me about school and friends and the boy she liked, who didn't know she existed. She wouldn't be part of this. I turned onto Broadmoor Avenue, entering the neighborhood Brenda and Patrick moved into 5 years ago. Big houses, big mortgages, the kind that demanded 2 incomes, or debt, or an inheritance that arrived sooner than planned. Brenda has your stubbornness and my heart, Daphne once told me after Brenda's graduation. That combination will either make her remarkable or destroy her. What would Daphne think now? I passed the Morrison Bridge, one of mine designed decades ago when I was younger, and the world felt more stable. It stood firm against the darkening sky, carrying thousands of people every day. Proof that I'd built something that mattered. What was Brenda building? The GPS announced my arrival. I pulled into the driveway slowly. The house glowed with warm light. Pumpkins on the porch. Smoke curling from the chimney. Perfect. Inviting. A flawless trap. I sat in the truck for a moment, engine idling, staring at the house where my daughter lived. Where she planned to serve me birthday cake laced with sedatives. Where she would watch me collapse, then call for help, too late. I checked the button camera once more. Still recording. Susan was watching. Detective Torres was ready. I turned off the engine and stepped into the cool evening air. Brenda opened the door before I could knock, like she'd been watching me through the window. Dad. Her voice was bright, almost musical, but when she wrapped her arms around me, the embrace felt hollow, all motion, no warmth. Like hugging a mannequin programmed to simulate affection. Happy birthday, come in, you must be freezing. It was 52 degrees. I wasn't freezing. Thanks, honey. I stepped into the foyer, noting how her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. They were calculating, assessing like a surgeon studying where to make the first incision. You look beautiful. She did technically. Hair, perfectly styled, makeup, flawless, wearing a burgundy dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Too much polish for a casual family dinner. She was dressed for something important. For murder, apparently, you dress up. Patrick. She called toward the back of the house. Dad's here. Heavy footsteps thundered through the hallway. Patrick emerged from what I assumed was the kitchen, his face flushed, his smile too wide, too enthusiastic. He reeked of bourbon, not subtly either. The smell hit me from 6 feet away. Uten, the birthday boy. He grabbed my hand in both of his, pumping it vigorously. 73 right. You don't look a day over 65, I swear to God. 72. I was 72. But I let it slide, played my role. Getting old, I said, allowing a slight tremor into my voice. Can't remember if I fed the cat this morning. I didn't have a cat. Hadn't had one since Daphne passed. But Brenda's eyes lit up at my confusion. Weird, that's okay, Dad, she said, her voice dripping with patronizing concern. We all forget things sometimes. Come on, let me show you what we've done with the living room. We just had it redecorated. She wasn't lying. The living room looked like a furniture showroom, everything new, expensive, coordinated. A leather sectional that probably cost $8,000. An entertainment center in dark walnut. Abstract art on the walls that I recognized from a gallery downtown where pieces started at 5 figures. Patrick was an insurance adjuster. Brenda worked part-time as a real estate agent. This level of spending didn't match their income even in a good year, which meant they were living on credit or planning to live on inheritance. Beautiful, I said, running my hand along the sofa's arm. When did you get all this? Last month. Patrick said, his enthusiasm unwavering. We figured life's too short not to enjoy nice things. You taught me that, Scott. I'd never taught him anything of the sort. I'd built a life on Navy discipline and engineering practicality, Buy quality, maintain it, make it last. This wasn't quality. This was desperation disguised as success. Grandpa. I turned to see Olivia bounding down the stairs, and for the first time since entering this house, I felt something genuine. She crashed into me with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of a 14-year-old, her arms squeezing tight around my waist. "Happy birthday, I made you a card." "Well, I drew on it." "Mom bought the card, but I did the drawing part." She pulled back, grinning. "It's a bridge. Because you're an engineer. Get it?" "I love it already." I said and meant it. My chest ached looking at her Daphne's eyes, my stubborn chin completely unaware that her parents were planning to kill her grandfather over dessert. "You get taller every time I see you. I'm 5'6" now. Mom says I'll probably hit 5'8" by next year." She took my hand, started pulling me toward the dining room. "Come on, dinner's almost ready. Mom made your favorite pot roast." Over Olivia's head, I caught Patrick and Brenda exchanging a look. Brief, barely a second, but I saw it. The kind of glance conspirators share when everything is going according to plan. Patrick's slight nod. Brenda's answering smile. The button camera under my shirt was recording. Susan was watching. Every word, every expression, every incriminating detail was being captured and transmitted to someone who could stop this if things went wrong. I hoped she was paying attention to that look. "Smells wonderful," I said, letting Olivia lead me through the house. The dining room table was set elaborately white tablecloth, good china candles already lit, wine glasses at each place setting, and in the center a covered cake stand. Chocolate cake, no doubt. My favorite. My execution. "Why don't you sit here, Dad?" Brenda said, pulling out the chair at the head of the table. "Birthday boy gets the best seat." I sat. Patrick moved to my left, Brenda to my right, positioning themselves like guards or witnesses. Olivia took the chair across from me, still chattering about school and her art project, and the boy she liked, innocent noise that felt like a shield against what her parents were planning. "Let me get the roast," Brenda said, disappearing into the kitchen. Patrick refilled his bourbon. I watched him pour 3 fingers into a crystal tumbler, watched his hand shake slightly as he lifted it to his lips. Nervous. He was nervous. Good. He should be. "You okay, Grandpa?" Olivia asked, her brow furrowed. "You look kind of, I don't know, serious." I arranged my face into what I hoped was a confused but pleasant expression. Just trying to remember if I locked the front door when I left. Can't recall. "You probably did," she said kindly. "You always do." Brenda returned with the roast on a serving platter. Patrick stood to help her serve, and I sat there at the head of the table, playing the role of the confused elderly father while the camera under my shirt recorded everything. As Patrick guided me toward my seat with a hand on my back, steering me like I was incompetent, like I needed managing, I caught our reflection in the hallway mirror. We were all smiling. Brenda's arm around Olivia, Patrick's hand on my shoulder. The perfect family portrait. And hidden beneath my shirt, the camera was recording every lie, every calculated gesture, every piece of evidence I'd need to survive the night. The dining room table was arranged like something from a magazine, spread crystal glasses, catching candlelight, fine china with gold trim, everything perfect, except the people sitting around it. I took my assigned seat at the head of the table, Patrick to my left, Brenda to my right, Olivia across from me. The positioning felt deliberate, flanked on both sides, observed from the front, like being interrogated except with pot roast instead of bright lights. The wall clock behind Olivia read 7 o'clock exactly. I made a mental note of the time. Susan would be watching the camera feed. Detective Torres was on standby for 8:30. I had 90 minutes to get through this dinner without eating poisoned dessert. 90 minutes felt like an eternity. "This looks wonderful, honey," I said as Brenda served the pot roast. The smell was actually good. She'd always been a decent cook, had learned from Daphne. The thought of her using her mother's recipes while planning to kill her father felt like another layer of betrayal. "I hope you like it," Brenda said, her smile bright but her eyes watchful. "I know you've been having trouble with your appetite lately." I hadn't mentioned anything about my appetite. She was building a narrative, creating a story for later. He wasn't eating well. We were worried. We tried to help. "Appetite's fine," I said. "Just getting older. Can't eat as much as I used to." Patrick laughed too loudly already on his third bourbon. "Join the club, Scott. I'm 42 and I already feel ancient. Can't party like I used to, that's for sure. 42 and drowning in gambling debt. 42 and plotting murder to pay off a loan shark. Some people get wiser with age." Patrick had gotten desperate. "So, how's work been, Patrick?" I asked, cutting into my roast. I made sure to eat slowly, carefully, giving Brenda nothing to worry about. Just a normal dinner with the family. "Great, actually. Really great." He leaned forward, his enthusiasm manufactured. "We're looking at some investment opportunities. Real estate ventures in Spokane. Could be huge if we play our cards right." Cards. Interesting choice of words for a gambling addict. "That sounds expensive," I said mildly. "Well, you know what they say. You gotta spend money to make money." Patrick drained his glass, reached for the bottle. "We're leveraging some assets, working with some private lenders. It's all very strategic. Private lenders. Marco Rossi. $400,000 at interest rates that would make legitimate banks look charitable. Very strategic indeed." "Dad, you should really take your vitamins," Brenda said suddenly, pulling a pill bottle from her pocket. "You forgot this morning, didn't you?" My chest tightened. The vitamins. The ones that weren't vitamins at all, the ones that had been drugging me for 2 months. I let confusion creep into my voice. "I thought I took them." "You didn't," she insisted, shaking 2 pills into her palm and sliding them across the table toward me. "Take them now with dinner. Doctor's orders." Dr. Graves's orders, more likely. The corrupt physician who'd prescribed sedatives disguised as supplements, who played golf with Patrick, and probably got a cut of whatever insurance payout they were planning to collect. I picked up the pills, made a show of examining them. "These look different from my usual ones. They're the same brand, Dad, just a different manufacturer." Brenda's voice was patient, but I caught the edge underneath. She needed me to take these pills. Needed me docile, confused, ready for the final dose in dessert. I palmed the pills smoothly, a trick I'd learned in the Navy when sailors tried to skip their malaria medication. Pretended to pop them in my mouth, lifted my water glass, made a swallowing motion. The pills stayed safely in my closed fist. "They're happy," I said, opening my mouth slightly to show it was empty. Brenda relaxed. "Just want to make sure you're taking care of yourself." The clock read 7:15. 15 minutes had passed. It felt like an hour. "Grandpa, guess what?" Olivia said, breaking the tension. "I got an A on my history project, the one about World War II. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." I smiled at her, the only genuine expression I'd managed all evening. "What was your topic?" The Navajo code talkers. It was so cool they used their language to send secret messages, and the Japanese couldn't figure it out. She was animated, excited, completely unaware of the adult drama playing out around her. "Did you know any code talkers when you were in the Navy?" "Different generation, honey. But I knew men who worked in communications. Brave people, all of them." "You never talk about your Navy days," Patrick said, his words slightly slurred. "Must have been something serving your country." The irony of a man planning to kill a veteran talking about service wasn't lost on me. It was a long time ago. "Dad forgets a lot of things from back then," Brenda interjected smoothly. "Don't you, Dad? You were telling me last week you couldn't remember your commanding officer's name." I'd told her no such thing. She was manufacturing confusion, creating evidence of cognitive decline. Every word out of her mouth was calculated, designed to build a case. Memory's not what it used to be. I agreed, playing along. Under the table, I slipped the pills into my jacket pocket. 2 more pills, she'd think I'd taken 2 more pieces of evidence I'd saved. The main course dragged on. Patrick talked about investments he didn't have money for. Brenda asked concerned questions about my health while monitoring every bite I took. Olivia chattered about school and friends and normal teenage things, and I sat at the head of the table watching the clock tick. Past 7:30, then 7:40, playing the role of the slightly confused elderly father while the button camera under my shirt recorded everything. Finally, mercifully, the plates were empty. Brenda stood smoothing her dress with hands that trembled slightly. "I'll get dessert," she said, her voice bright but unsteady. "Your favorite, Dad. Chocolate cake just like Mom used to make." While Brenda was in the kitchen, Olivia leaned toward me with the kind of honesty only teenagers possess. "Grandpa, you seem totally fine to me." Her voice was quiet, meant just for me and Patrick, who was refilling his wine glass for the 4th time. "Your mom keeps saying you're starting to forget stuff and get confused, but you remembered my birthday last month. You even remembered what I asked for that art set from the fancy store downtown." My chest tightened. Out of the mouths of babes. Or in this case, observant 14-year-olds who hadn't yet learned that sometimes adults lie for terrible reasons. "Well, I have my good days and bad days," I said, carefully aware the camera was recording this. Aware Patrick had gone very still beside me, his wine glass frozen halfway to his lips. "But tonight you seem totally normal." Olivia frowned, that little crease appearing between her eyebrows, the same one Daphne used to get when she was working through a problem. "Actually, everyone's been acting weird tonight. Not you, them." She gestured vaguely toward the kitchen where Brenda was presumably preparing my death dessert. "Why does Mom keep watching you like that? Like what, sweetheart? Like, I don't know. Like she's waiting for something to happen. And Dad..." She glanced at Patrick, who had finally taken a large swallow of wine. "You've been super jumpy all night. Is something wrong? Is it about money? I heard you guys arguing last week about bills or something." Patrick's wine glass hit the table harder than he'd intended, the crystal ringing out sharply in the sudden silence. "Everything's fine, Olivia. Your mom's just concerned about Grandpa's health. That's all. Nothing for you to worry about." But Olivia wasn't backing down. She'd inherited my stubbornness, along with Daphne's perceptiveness, a dangerous combination for her parents' plans. "But why are you guys being so weird about it? Like if Grandpa was really sick, wouldn't you just say so instead of all this?" She waved her hand, searching for words. "This creepy watching thing. Olivia," Patrick's voice had an edge now. "Drop it. I'm just saying it's weird. You keep looking at each other like you're in some kind of..." "No, that's enough." Brenda's voice cut through the dining room like a knife. She stood in the doorway from the kitchen, hands empty, no dessert, yet her face carefully composed, but her eyes blazing. She'd heard Olivia's questions. Heard her daughter poking holes in the carefully constructed narrative they'd been building for 8 weeks. "Mom, I was just..." "Go to your room." Brenda's tone was flat final. "Now." Olivia's eyes widened. "What? Why? I didn't do anything." "Now, Olivia." The harshness in Brenda's voice made even me flinch. This wasn't the concerned daughter who'd been monitoring my eating all evening. This was something rawer, more desperate. The mask had slipped just for a moment, and what showed underneath wasn't pleasant. "But Mom..." Did I stutter? Brenda took a step into the room, and I saw Patrick's hand tighten around his wine glass. "Go to your room. Do your homework. I'll bring you cake later." Olivia stood slowly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Her eyes were shiny with tears, not understanding what she'd done wrong. not comprehending that she'd simply been too observant, too honest, at exactly the wrong time. "I was just trying to—" Her voice cracked. "Your room, now!" Olivia looked at me, confusion and hurt written across her face. I wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault. Wanted to explain that she'd done nothing wrong except notice what her parents were hoping no one would notice. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I had enough evidence to end this nightmare for good. "It's okay, sweetheart," I said gently. "I'll see you before I leave tonight. If I lived that long." Olivia nodded, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. She walked past Brenda without looking at her, and I heard her footsteps on the stairs. Slow, reluctant, still confused about why she was being punished for asking honest questions. The sound of her bedroom door closing echoed through the house. Final. Absolute. And suddenly the dining room felt very different. Patrick shifted in his seat, no longer trying to maintain the jovial host performance. Brenda stood in the doorway, breathing slightly too fast. Her hands clenched at her sides. The pretense of a normal family birthday dinner had evaporated the moment their daughter had questioned what she was seeing. Now it was just the three of us. No innocent witness. No buffer. No reason to maintain the facade. The silence stretched out heavy and threatening. Through the kitchen doorway behind Brenda, I could see the cake stand sitting on the counter. Chocolate frosting. 3 layers. A generous slice already cut and plated, waiting for me. Brenda's eyes met mine across the dining room, and for the first time tonight, I saw her without the mask. Not the concerned daughter, not the loving mother, just a woman who needed money badly enough to kill her own father, and who'd just realized her 14-year-old daughter was dangerously close to figuring it out. "She's too smart for her own good," Brenda said quietly, almost to herself. "She gets that from her grandmother." I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the fear crawling up my spine. Patrick laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Well, Daphne's not here to interfere, is she?" The casual invocation of my dead wife's name in the context of their murder plot made something cold and hard settle in my chest. But I kept my face neutral, kept playing the role of the slightly confused elderly father who had no idea what was really happening. The bedroom door upstairs, Olivia's door, had closed like a prison cell door. Now it was just the three of us alone with their plan and my knowledge of it. When Brenda emerged from the kitchen, she carried a chocolate cake that should have represented love, but instead represented something far darker. The cake was perfect, 3 layers of rich chocolate with dark ganache frosting, exactly the way Daphne used to make it for my birthday every year. The sight of it hit me like a physical blow. 45 years of birthdays, 45 times watching my wife carefully measure cocoa and sugar, test the layers with a toothpick, frost each tier with patient precision. She'd always saved the corner piece for me because she knew I liked the extra frosting. Now her daughter was using that same recipe to kill me. "Here we go," Brenda said, her voice artificially bright. But her hands trembled as she set the cake stand on the table between us. The tremor was slight, most people might not have noticed, but I'd spent 50 years reading structural vibrations in bridges. I knew instability when I saw it. She was nervous. "Good. That looks beautiful, honey," I said, keeping my voice warm, grandfatherly. "Just like Mom used to make." Something flickered across Brenda's face, guilt maybe, or just the recognition that she was about to poison her father with her dead mother's recipe. But it passed quickly, replaced by that false smile she'd been wearing all evening. "You know, I wanted tonight to be special," she said, picking up the cake server. "Your 73rd birthday deserves the best." 72nd. But I didn't correct her again. Let her think I was confused, forgetful the declining old man they'd been manufacturing for 8 weeks. She cut the first slice, a massive wedge easily 3 times larger than the pieces she'd cut for Patrick and herself. The disparity was obvious, almost comically so. A normal serving would have been 1/12 of the cake. Mine was closer to 1/4 of the entire thing. More cake meant more surface area. More surface area meant more places to hide crushed sedatives. And that's a lot of cake, I observed mildly. Well, it's your birthday. You should have as much as you want. Brenda's voice was steady, but I caught the white residue on her fingertips as she slid the plate toward me, a fine powder that clung to the whorls of her fingerprints like chalk dust. She noticed me looking and quickly wiped her hands on her napkin, but I'd already seen it. Evidence. The camera under my shirt had captured it. She positioned the plate directly in front of me with precise care, the fork and napkin arranged just so. Then she settled back into her chair, watching, waiting. Patrick shifted beside me, his fourth, or was it fifth bourbon, sitting half-finished at his elbow. He checked his watch, a quick flick of his wrist that he tried to make casual but came across as anxious. How long did crushed sedatives take to work? 15 minutes, 20. He was calculating timeline, probably figuring out when to call 911, how long to wait before discovering me unresponsive. Aren't you two having cake? I asked, noting their much smaller slices remained untouched on their plates. We'll wait for you to start, Brenda said. Birthday boy gets the first bite, of course. They needed to watch me eat the poison slice. Needed to be sure I'd actually consumed it before they could relax, before they could start mentally spending the money I represented. $870,000 from my house. $250,000 from life insurance. Over 1 million reasons to murder sitting right there in 3 layers of chocolate cake. I picked up my fork. The silver felt heavy in my hand, or maybe that was just my awareness of what the next 60 seconds would determine. Eat this cake and I'd die, probably within the hour while they sat here pretending to be concerned, waiting just long enough to make my death look accidental before calling for help that would arrive too late. Don't eat it, and I'd have to explain why. Would have to reveal I knew what they'd done, what they were planning. And then what? Would Patrick grab me? Would Brenda call Dr. Graves to come assess my paranoid delusions? The clock on the wall behind Patrick read 7:42. 48 minutes until Susan called Detective Torres. 48 minutes until backup arrived. I just had to survive that long. I'm Dad. Brenda's voice had an edge now. Are you okay? I realized I'd been staring at the cake for too long. Just admiring it, I said. You did such a beautiful job. Mom would be proud. The invocation of Daphne seemed to hit Brenda harder than I'd expected. Her mouth tightened, and for just a second, I saw something that might have been grief, or maybe just irritation that I was taking so long to eat the murder weapon she'd so carefully prepared. Well, go ahead. Patrick said, his jovial mask slipping to reveal the desperate man underneath. Try it. Brenda worked on it all afternoon. I'll bet she did. Carefully crushing pills, measuring dosage, mixing the powder into the frosting where it would be invisible against the dark chocolate. Making sure the slice she gave me contained enough sedatives to stop my 72-year-old heart. I cut into the cake with my fork. The layers separated perfectly. Daphne's recipe was always reliable. Moist chocolate cake, rich ganache, smooth and dark. It looked delicious. It smelled like every birthday I'd had for 4 decades. It would kill me if I ate it. I lifted the fork toward my mouth. Let it hover there for just a moment. Everything depended on what happened in the next 60 seconds. Before I tell you how I escaped what was waiting for me that night, pause for a moment. Based on everything you've heard so far, what do you think was really happening, and what would you have done in my place? Share your thoughts or predictions in the comments so I know you're still here with me. And after you finish the video, rate it on a scale of 1 to 10 in the comments. Your support truly helps me make even better stories. One important note. The next part of this story includes fictional elements, and some details may not fully reflect reality. If that's not something you're comfortable with, this is a good place to stop watching. I'm sorry, I said slowly, pushing back from the table, letting my chair scrape against the hardwood floor. I need to wash my hands before I eat. Old Navy habit. The fork was still in my hand, the poisoned cake still untouched on my plate. I set the fork down carefully, like an old man who needed to concentrate on simple tasks. Brenda's face went rigid. "Dad, just eat first. The cake will get warm." Too eager. The desperation in her voice was naked, unmistakable. She needed me to eat that cake, needed to watch me consume the lethal dose she'd so carefully measured into the frosting. Just a minute," I said, my voice mild apologetic. "Won't take long." I stood moving with the careful slowness I'd been cultivating all evening, the slightly unsteady gait of a 72-year-old man who might be exactly as confused as his daughter had been claiming. Patrick didn't even look up, was already refilling his bourbon for what had to be his 6th drink of the evening, rambling about some real estate investment opportunity in Portland that probably didn't exist. The hallway stretched out before me. The bathroom was to the left, clearly visible from the dining room. Instead, I turned right. The sideboard sat against the wall, a massive piece of mahogany that Brenda had probably paid too much for. On top of it, serving dishes from dinner still waited to be cleared. And there, exactly where I'd noticed it earlier when Patrick had served himself pot roast, was his plate. His cake plate. The one Brenda had cut for him, a normal-sized slice, maybe 1/12 of the total cake. No white powder residue on the frosting. No triple-sized portion meant to hide a lethal dose of sedatives. Just regular chocolate cake made from Daphne's recipe. Safe cake. My hands moved before my brain fully caught up, decades of Navy training taking over. Fast, silent, precise. The kind of muscle memory you develop when you're 22, and your life depends on following orders without hesitation. Swap Scott's plate with Patrick's plate. Leave the poisoned slice on the sideboard. Take the safe slice back to the table. The plates were identical. Brenda's good china with the gold trim she'd probably bought on credit, like everything else in this house. Same size, same weight, same positioning of the fork and napkin. 3 seconds, maybe 4. That's all it took. I heard Patrick's voice from the dining room still going on about Portland. "Market's about to explode. I'm telling you, if we can just get the capital together." He had no idea he was about to eat the sedatives meant to kill his father-in-law. I walked back into the dining room at the same measured pace I'd left, carrying the safe cake slice like it was exactly what I'd started with. Patrick hadn't even noticed I'd gone. Brenda was watching me like a hawk, her eyes tracking my movement from hallway to chair. "Feel better?" she asked, her voice tight. "Much." I sat down, picked up my fork, and cut into the cake. Took a bite. Let the chocolate melt on my tongue, rich, familiar, exactly the way Daphne used to make it. For a moment, grief hit me harder than fear. This should have been a celebration. Should have been family gathered around a table sharing memories and laughter, and a cake made with love instead of murder. "It's perfect, honey," I said, and meant it. The cake was perfect. It was just the people around it who were poison. Brenda's shoulders relaxed slightly. She'd watched me take that first bite, had seen me swallow, and relief flooded her face. "He's eating it. He's consuming the sedatives. The plan is working. Except, I wasn't eating poisoned cake." Patrick's safe slice sat on my plate while the lethal dose waited on the sideboard in the hallway, exactly where Patrick had left his original plate. Patrick was still talking, his words starting to slur together, now that the bourbon was really hitting him. "Shut. This guy I know, Marcus. He's got connections in Spokane, says we could flip properties for..." He cut into his own cake, the fork moving automatically while he rambled. Brought it to his mouth. Took a big bite, the first bite of what should have been his safe slice, what was now the poisoned portion that Brenda had prepared so carefully for her father. I watched him swallow, take another bite. Still talking, barely tasting the cake. Just shoveling it in between sentences about investments and opportunities and all the lies he'd been telling himself to justify what they'd planned to do tonight. The clock on the wall read 7:47. 43 minutes until Susan called Detective Torres. I took another bite of my safe cake, let it sit on my tongue for a moment before swallowing, and counted the seconds in my head. For 5 minutes, we sat there eating cake like a normal family celebrating a birthday. Then Patrick's fork clattered onto his plate. I'd been counting. 8:05 when we'd started eating. 8:06 when Patrick had taken his third large bite of the poisoned cake meant for me. 8:07 when Brenda had looked at me with growing confusion, probably wondering why I wasn't showing any signs of the sedatives she'd carefully measured into my slice. 8:10 when Patrick's face began to change color. "You okay, honey?" Brenda asked, her attention shifting from me to her husband. Patrick had gone very still, one hand pressed against his stomach, his bourbon forgotten on the table. "I'm fine," he said, but his voice sounded strained. "Just ate too fast, I think." I took another bite of my safe cake, Patrick's original slice, the one without any pharmaceutical additions, and watched. The engineer in me was fascinated by the precision of it all. The human in me felt a cold satisfaction. 8:12. Patrick pushed back from the table abruptly, his chair scraping loud against the hardwood. I don't feel good." He stood swaying slightly, one hand still clutching his stomach. His face had gone from flushed to a greenish pale that would have been comical in any other context. Brenda was on her feet now, alarm replacing confusion. "What's wrong?" "I think I'm gonna—" He didn't finish the sentence, just stumbled toward the hallway, hand over his mouth. 8:13. The sound of violent retching echoed from the bathroom, brutal wrenching, the kind of vomiting that comes from deep in the gut and doesn't stop. Once, twice, 3 times. I'd heard that sound before decades ago in the Navy when a sailor had accidentally ingested contaminated water. Ipecac did. That forced your body to expel everything in your stomach with an urgency that couldn't be ignored or controlled. Brenda stood frozen in the dining room doorway, her face a mask of confusion and growing panic. "I don't understand." "What's happening? Did he eat something bad, Patrick?" More retching, more violent expulsion. Patrick's agony was audible even from the dining room. I set down my fork with deliberate calm and looked at Brenda. Really looked at her, this woman who'd been my daughter for 40 years, who'd spent 8 weeks drugging me, who'd baked a chocolate cake with a lethal dose of sedatives meant to stop my heart. "It wasn't sedatives, Brenda." She turned to me, her eyes wild. "What?" "The cake. The slice you cut for me, the one with the crushed pills mixed into the frosting." I kept my voice even factual, the way I'd deliver a bridge inspection report. "It wasn't sedatives. It was ipecac syrup." Her face went blank, not comprehending. Ipecac," I repeated. "It's an emetic. Makes you vomit. Violently. For 20 to 30 minutes. It's what poison control centers used to use before activated charcoal became standard." I paused, letting that sink in. "The pharmacist who filled your prescription, Nathan Cooper at Save More Pharmacy, he switched the pills. Gave you ipecac instead of lorazepam." Another wave of retching from the bathroom. Patrick's suffering provided a grotesque soundtrack to my explanation. "That's impossible," Brenda whispered. "I picked up the prescription myself. I saw the label. It said lorazepam. But the pills inside weren't lorazepam." I picked up my water glass, took a sip, completely calm. "Nathan has a conscience, apparently. When he figured out what you and Patrick were planning, he made a substitution. He couldn't quite bring himself to call the police. That would have cost him his job, maybe his license. But he also couldn't let you kill me. So he gave you something that would make me violently ill but wouldn't actually harm me." Brenda's legs seemed to give out. She sank back into her chair, staring at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "Oh, of course I didn't eat the ipecac-laced cake anyway," I continued. "When I went to wash my hands, that old Navy habit I mentioned, I swapped plates. The poisoned slice you cut for me, Patrick, just ate it. And he's discovering right now what 30 milligrams of crushed ipecac mixed into chocolate frosting does to a human digestive system. The bathroom had gone momentarily quiet. Then another violent heave followed by Patrick's groan of misery. Brenda's face cycled through emotions: shock, disbelief, denial, and finally dawning horror. You knew. This whole time you knew. Susan Mitchell called me this afternoon. The nurse at Evergreen Medical. She recognized what you were doing. Recognized it because she'd watched her own mother die from the same scheme 3 years ago. I reached under my shirt and pulled out the button camera, held it up so Brenda could see it clearly. Everything's been recorded. Every word you said, every concerned look you faked, every time you monitored whether I'd taken those vitamins you'd been giving me for 2 months. Brenda's eyes fixed on the camera, and something in her expression broke. From outside, the distant wail of sirens grew louder. "What did you do?" she whispered. "I called the police." Well, technically, Susan called Detective Torres at 8:30 if she hadn't heard from me. But I texted her at 8:15 once I was sure Patrick had ingested enough of the ipecac to need medical attention. The police are probably 3 minutes out, maybe less. The sirens were very close now, multiple vehicles from the sound of it. Brenda looked toward the front windows, her face chalk white, then back at me. "Dad, please." "Don't." My voice came out harder than I'd intended. "Don't call me that. Don't pretend there's still a relationship here worth salvaging. You spent 2 months poisoning me. You baked me a birthday cake meant to kill me. You were planning to sit here and watch me die, then call 911 just late enough that I'd be dead before help arrived." I stood, the camera still in my hand. "You chose money over your father. You chose a loan shark's deadline over the man who raised you, who taught you to ride a bike, who walked you down the aisle on your wedding day." The sirens cut off abruptly. They'd arrived. Patrick stumbled out of the bathroom, his face gray, his shirt soaked with sweat, just as the front door I'd deliberately left unlocked burst open. Detective Michael Torres strode in, badge held high, followed by 3 uniformed officers and 2 paramedics. "Freeze. Seattle Police." The chaos of flashing lights and barked commands felt surreal, like watching a movie where I was both observer and actor. Paramedics had Patrick on the dining room floor, checking his vitals while he retched into a plastic basin they'd provided. One of them, a young woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun, looked up at Detective Torres with confusion. Her blood pressure's elevated but stable. Pulse is fast but regular. Pupils responsive. She glanced at Patrick as another wave of nausea hit him. "These aren't typical sedative overdose symptoms. This looks like, I don't know, food poisoning, severe gastric distress." "Ipecac syrup," I said from my chair. I hadn't moved from my position at the head of the table, hadn't stood when the police arrived. Just sat there, still holding my fork, watching decades of planning collapse around my daughter. "Crushed into the cake frosting. About 30 milligrams, I'd estimate." The paramedic's eyes widened. "Ipecac. That would explain the vomiting. But why would—" "Ma'am, step back, please." Torres said, his attention shifting to Brenda, who stood frozen against the wall, her face chalk white. He turned to me, his expression professionally neutral. "Mr. Hartley, you're the one who called this in, or rather your contact, Susan Mitchell, called us at your request. I need you to explain what's happening here." I set down my fork with deliberate care. "There's a dangerous substance in that cake, Detective. My daughter put it there with the intent to harm me. She's been systematically drugging me for the past 2 months, staging evidence of cognitive decline, building a case for conservatorship so she could gain control of my assets." I kept my voice level, factual. Tonight was supposed to be the final act. The cake contained what she believed was a lethal dose of sedatives. She intended to watch me consume it, wait for me to die, then call 911 too late to save me. "That's insane." Brenda's voice was shrill, desperate. "Dad, what are you saying? You're confused. You don't know what you're talking about." She turned to Torres, tears streaming down her face. Real tears, or maybe just panic manifesting as waterworks. "Detective, please, my father has dementia. He's been having episodes, memory problems, paranoid delusions. This is exactly what I've been trying to tell his doctors, what I've been documenting for months." "Brenda!" My voice cut through her performance. "Stop. He needs help. He needs to be evaluated. This is a medical emergency." I unbuttoned my shirt. The movement was deliberate calm, and it stopped Brenda mid-sentence. She watched confusion replacing desperation on her face as I reached under my collar and unclipped the button camera Susan had given me in the parking lot. "Everything was recorded," I said, holding up the tiny device. "Every word, every action, every piece of evidence you manufactured tonight." Torres's eyebrows rose slightly, the first break in his professional composure. "Is that a recording device, video and audio? It's been transmitting to Susan Mitchell's phone for the past 2 hours." I handed it to Torres. "You'll want to watch the footage, particularly the part where Brenda serves the cake, where you can see white powder residue on her fingers, where she cuts an abnormally large slice for me, triple the size of normal portions, where she insists I eat first so she can watch." Brenda's face drained of what little color remained. One of the uniformed officers, a young man who looked barely 30, produced a laptop from the patrol car. Torres connected the camera, his fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. The dining room fell silent, except for Patrick's continued retching and the soft click of Torres's typing. Then the video began to play. I couldn't see the screen from my angle, but I watched Torres's face as he viewed the footage. Saw his expression harden when Brenda served the cake. Saw his jaw clench when she pushed the plate toward me with trembling hands. Saw something that might have been anger flash across his features when the audio captured her saying, "Birthday boy gets the first bite." "There's more," I said quietly. 2 months of vitamins that were actually low-dose sedatives. Prescription records from Dr. Kenneth Graves, who happens to be Patrick's golf buddy and has a reputation for generous prescribing. Pharmacy instructions that say, "Crush into food," handwritten by my daughter. Financial records showing Patrick owes $400,000 to a loan shark named Marco Rossi. Documentation of my assets. My house worth $870,000, my life insurance policy for $250,000 with Brenda listed as sole beneficiary. Torres looked up from the laptop. His eyes moved from the screen to Brenda, then back to the screen. He watched for another 30 seconds, then closed the laptop with a decisive click. "Officer Miller," he said to the young cop with the laptop, "secure this as evidence. Get it to the tech unit for full download and chain of custody documentation." "Yes, sir." Torres stood straightening his jacket. His eyes locked onto Brenda's. "Ma'am, I need you to place your hands behind your back." "What? No, this is ridiculous. He's lying. He's confused." Brenda backed against the wall, her hands raised defensively. "You can't believe him. He has dementia. He doesn't know what he's saying." "Ma'am, hands behind your back, now. I want a lawyer. I want—" 2 uniformed officers moved in, professional and efficient. Brenda tried to pull away, but they guided her hands behind her back with practiced ease. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the dining room. Torres's voice was cold, professional, delivering the words with the weight of law behind them. "Brenda Walsh, you're under arrest for elder endangerment, conspiracy, and elder abuse. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you." Brenda's scream, high-pitched, desperate, the sound of someone watching their carefully constructed life shatter, echoed through the house as the officers began leading her toward the door. The emergency room reeked of disinfectant and desperation, the harsh fluorescent lighting a brutal assault after the warm deception of that dining room. I sat in a plastic chair in the interview area, a glorified corner separated from the main ER by a flimsy curtain, while Detective Torres took my formal statement. Across the emergency department, visible through the gap in the curtain, Patrick lay in an ER bed with an IV in his arm and a uniformed officer standing guard. He'd stopped vomiting about 30 minutes ago, but he still looked like death warmed over. Appropriate considering what he'd tried to do. And you said you swapped the plates when you went to wash your hands. Torres was saying, his pen moving across his notepad in quick, efficient strokes. You took Patrick's safe slice from the sideboard and left your poisoned slice there. Skiing. Correct. I kept my voice steady, factual. I'd given this statement 3 times already, once at the house, once in the patrol car, and now here in the ER. The repetition was deliberate, Torres checking for inconsistencies in my story. But there weren't any inconsistencies. Just the truth, cold and simple as structural steel. A woman in a white coat approached her hospital ID badge swinging from a lanyard around her neck. Mid-40s, dark hair pulled back in a bun, the kind of tired eyes that came from too many late shifts. Detective Torres. She extended her hand. Dr. Claire Donovan, toxicology. I have the preliminary results on your patient. Torres stood shaking her hand. That was fast. Elder abuse cases get priority. Dr. Donovan pulled a tablet from under her arm, swiping through screens. Your victim, she glanced at me. Mr. Hartley, correct, we ran a full toxicology panel. And here's where it gets interesting. I leaned forward despite myself. No sedatives detected. Dr. Donovan said, her finger tracing down the tablet screen. No benzodiazepines, no barbiturates, no Z-drugs. Nothing in the sedative hypnotic class at all. Torres frowned. But the daughter claimed she'd been giving him sedatives for 2 months. The prescription records, I'm telling you what the blood work shows. Mr. Hartley's system is clean. Dr. Donovan swiped to another screen. What we did find in Mr. Patrick Walsh's system is emetine and cephaline, both alkaloids found in ipecac syrup. Levels consistent with ingestion approximately 2 to 3 hours ago. Ipecac, Torres's frown deepened. That's an emetic. Makes you vomit. How did sedatives become ipecac? A thought hit me like a freight train. Someone had switched the pills before tonight. Before Brenda ever crushed them into that chocolate frosting. Detective, Patrick's voice, weak and hoarse, drifted across the ER. The uniformed officer stepped aside as Torres moved toward the bed, and I followed Torres, not stopping me. Patrick looked up at us with red-rimmed eyes, his face still pale and clammy. I need to tell you something. Torres pulled out his notepad. Go ahead, Mr. Walsh. The pills, the lorazepam. I got them from Nathan Cooper. Patrick's voice cracked. Save More Pharmacy on Pike Street. He sold them to me. Under the table. No prescription. I paid him $200. So you purchased sedatives illegally from a pharmacist named Nathan Cooper, Torres repeated, writing. At Save More on Pike Street. Yeah. I gave them to Brenda, told her they were what Dr. Graves prescribed for Scott. She thought they were legitimate. Patrick closed his eyes. But if what the doctor's saying is true, if they weren't sedatives at all, then someone switched them, I said quietly. All eyes turned to me. Nathan Cooper. I continued working through it aloud. Patrick gave him money for sedatives. Nathan took the money, gave him pills, said they were lorazepam. But they weren't. They were ipecac. I looked at Torres. He knew. He knew what Patrick was planning to do with them. Dr. Donovan nodded slowly. That would explain why Mr. Hartley's blood work is clean, despite allegedly taking sedatives for 2 months. If the vitamins his daughter gave him were actually ipecac all along, he would have been vomiting constantly. Torres finished. Which means they weren't ipecac for the past 2 months. Just tonight's dose. Nathan must have switched them recently, I said. Maybe when Brenda came to pick up the final prescription, he realized what she was planning and substituted ipecac for the lethal dose. Torres closed his notepad with a decisive snap. We need to bring in this Nathan Cooper. Get his statement. Find out exactly when and why he made the switch. But I already knew why. The same reason Susan Mitchell had called me. The same reason that nurse had risked her job to warn a stranger. Because some people still had a conscience. Some people couldn't stand by and watch a murder happen, even if reporting it officially might cost them everything. Nathan Cooper had saved my life, and he'd done it in a way that wouldn't immediately expose him. If Patrick's plan had worked, if I'd eaten that cake without swapping the plates, I would have gotten violently ill but recovered. Patrick and Brenda would have panicked, called 911, and I would have survived to tell the police what they'd done. Either way, Nathan had ensured I wouldn't die. Mr. Hartley, Torres's voice pulled me back to the present. You swapped the plates, which means you ate Patrick's safe slice. But Patrick ate what you thought was your poisoned slice, which turns out to have been ipecac instead of sedatives. He met my eyes. Now, if those pills had been real sedatives like Patrick and Brenda believed you'd be dead right now. The weight of that statement settled over me like a heavy blanket. Dead. Not in a hospital giving statements, but on a morgue slab while Brenda played the grieving daughter, and Patrick calculated how quickly they could access my bank accounts. Someone we don't know saved your life tonight. Torres said, his voice grave. We need to find whoever switched those pills. After midnight in a windowless room that reeked of burnt coffee and old paperwork, I learned the actual price my daughter had set on my life. Special Agent Lisa Monroe sat across from me, her FBI badge clipped to her belt, a laptop open between us. Detective Torres stood against the wall, arms folded, watching, as Monroe pulled up screen after screen of Patrick's digital life bank statements, text messages, search histories, the kind of evidence that told a story more damning than any confession. Mr. Hartley, I'm with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, Monroe said, her voice carrying the practiced calm of someone who'd delivered terrible news many times before. Detective Torres called us in because your son-in-law's debts connect to an ongoing organized crime investigation. My chest tightened. Organized crime. Monroe turned the laptop toward me. The screen showed a series of wire transfers, each one larger than the last, all flowing from Patrick's account to something called Rossi Capital Management, LLC. The Marco Rossi, Monroe said. He runs a loan operation out of Tukwila. On paper, it's a legitimate private lending firm. In reality, it's a loan sharking operation with interest rates that would make a credit card company blush. We've been building a RICO case against him for 3 years. She clicked to another screen, text messages. I recognized Patrick's number at the top. Payment due October 30th. $400,000 plus interest. No extensions. 2 weeks, Patrick. Then we come for you. Chico, we know where your family lives. Your wife. Your daughter. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The timestamp on the last message, October 1st. 2 weeks before tonight's dinner. 2 weeks before Patrick and Brenda had planned to kill me. $400,000! I said quietly, the number sitting heavy in my stomach. Gambling debts, Monroe confirmed. Online poker, mostly some sports betting. Patrick's been losing money for 2 years, borrowing from Marco to cover his losses, then losing more, trying to win it back. Classic addiction spiral. She clicked to another file, a spreadsheet labeled Assets Analysis. This is what we found on Patrick's laptop. He'd been tracking your net worth. The spreadsheet was meticulous, almost professional. Scott Hartley residence, $870,000. Zillow estimate, no mortgage. Life insurance policy, Navy Federal, $250,000. Brenda Walsh, sole beneficiary. Estimated probate timeline 6 to 8 months. Insurance payout. Timeline 30 days from death certificate. Total liquid assets accessible within 60 days, $250,000. My house had been reduced to a line item. My life insurance meant to provide for Brenda if something happened to me meant to be a final act of love from a father to his daughter had become a murder incentive. The timeline is what makes this premeditated. Monroe continued, her finger tracing down the screen. If Patrick needed $250,000 immediately to keep Marco's people from coming after him. The life insurance would pay out within 30 days of your death. That would buy him time. Then he could sell your house, probably at a loss, to move it quickly and pay off the remaining debt with enough left over to disappear or start fresh. He had it all calculated. I said, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. Down to the day. Monroe clicked to another file search history. August 15th. Patrick searched, how long does life insurance take to pay out after death? August 20th. Conservatorship, elderly parent, Washington State. September 5th. Sedatives that mimic natural causes. September 10th. Save More Pharmacy, Pike Street. That last one caught my attention. Save More Pharmacy. That's where Nathan Cooper works, Monroe nodded. We're still piecing together that connection. But yes, Patrick contacted Nathan Cooper on September 12th according to phone records. They met 3 times before Patrick purchased the pills. Torres pushed off from the wall. The question is, when did Nathan figure out what Patrick was planning, and why did he switch the pills instead of calling the police? We'll ask him that when we bring him in, Monroe said. But based on the timeline, Nathan had to have switched the pills sometime in the last week, probably when Brenda came to pick up what she thought was the final prescription. I looked at the spreadsheet again, at the cold calculation of my death. $1,120,000. That's what I was worth to my daughter, or more accurately, what Patrick's debt had made me worth. The charges are stacking up, Monroe said, closing the laptop. Elder endangerment in the 1st degree, that's a Class B felony in Washington. Conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, financial exploitation. And because Patrick's debt involves interstate wire transfers to an organized crime operation, we can bring federal charges for wire fraud and potentially RICO conspiracy. How long, I asked? How long would they go to prison? With the evidence, we have the camera footage, the toxicology reports, Patrick's digital footprint. The financial motive, we're looking at 15 to 20 years for Brenda. Possibly more for Patrick, given his connection to Marco Rossi. Monroe's expression softened slightly. Mr. Hartley, I've worked financial crimes for 12 years. I've seen people kill for a lot less money. But what makes this particularly cold is the premeditation. They spent 8 weeks slowly building a case that you were incompetent, systematically drugging you, isolating you, all so they could kill you and make it look like a tragic accident involving a confused elderly man who accidentally overdosed. She paused, let that sink in. They were willing to end your life for money they didn't earn themselves. Money that represented nothing more than a solution to Patrick's gambling problem and Brenda's financial stress. The room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang. Normal police station sounds. Normal night shift operations. But nothing about tonight felt normal. Monroe reached across the table and slid another document toward me, this one with a familiar logo in the corner. Save More Pharmacy. Mr. Hartley. She said, her voice careful now, almost gentle. There's one more thing you need to know about the pharmacist who saved you. 2 days later, the county jail visitation room was divided by thick, bulletproof glass phones on either side, like something from an old movie. Detective Torres had arranged this meeting at my request. I'd needed to see him, needed to understand why a stranger had risked everything to save a man he'd never met. The FBI wanted to interview Nathan about his illegal prescription sales, about his connection to Patrick, about the exact timeline of when he'd switched the pills. But I'd asked first. Torres had granted me 20 minutes. Nathan Cooper looked smaller than I'd imagined. 38, according to his arrest record, but he carried himself like someone much older, shoulders hunched, eyes shadowed with exhaustion and fear. He wore an orange jumpsuit that hung loose on his frame, and when he sat down across from me and picked up the phone, his hand trembled. Mr. Hartley. His voice through the phone was quiet, hoarse. I don't know what to say. Start with how you knew, I said. How you knew what Patrick was planning. Nathan's eyes dropped to the counter in front of him. Poker. We played at a private game every Thursday night. Been doing it for about a year. Patrick was... He was irregular. Lost more than he won, but he kept coming back. Got worse and worse over the summer. He took a breath. Early September, he showed up drunk, started talking about his father-in-law, about how much the old man's house was worth, how much his life insurance was. At first I thought he was just venting, stressed about money. But then he asked me if I could get him sedatives, off the books, no prescription. And you said yes. I said yes. Nathan's jaw clenched. I've been selling pills under the table for 2 years. Started after my wife left when I couldn't make rent and pay for my daughter's daycare on just my salary. It's wrong. I know it's wrong. But I told myself it wasn't hurting anyone, just people who wanted painkillers or sleeping pills, who didn't want to deal with doctors and insurance. Until Patrick told me exactly what he wanted to use them for. Nathan looked up, met my eyes through the glass. He was drunk enough that he didn't filter anything. Told me about the conservatorship plan, about getting you declared incompetent, about the birthday dinner where they'd give you the final dose. He even laughed about it, said the old man won't know what hit him. The memory of that laugh seemed to physically hurt Nathan. His shoulders curled further inward. I should have called the police right then, he continued. Should have recorded the conversation, turned him in, done something. But I couldn't. His voice cracked. If I reported Patrick, I'd have to explain how I knew. I'd have to admit I was selling drugs illegally. I'd lose my license, go to jail, and then what happens to my daughter? She's 6 years old, Mr. Hartley. 6. Her mom's not in the picture. I'm all she has. So you switched the pills. I switched the pills. Nathan nodded, something that might have been relief crossing his face. Patrick came back 2 weeks later, wanted to buy lorazepam. 50 tablets, 30 milligrams each. I took his $200, gave him a bottle with the right label, told him exactly how to crush them into powder. But the pills I gave him weren't lorazepam. They were ipecac syrup tablets. Emetic, makes you vomit. Makes you vomit violently for 30 minutes. Nathan corrected. Unpleasant as hell, but not dangerous unless you're already severely ill. I figured. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I figured if you somehow ate the cake, you'd get sick enough to go to the hospital, and the doctors would figure out what happened. And if Patrick ate it, which apparently he did, same thing. Either way, nobody dies. The plot fails. You live. And I don't have to explain to my daughter why Daddy went to jail for helping a man commit murder. He set down the phone for a moment, pressed both hands against his face. When he picked it back up, his eyes were red. I'm a criminal, Mr. Hartley. I broke the law. I sold prescription drugs without authorization. I deserve whatever punishment I get. But I'm not a murderer. I couldn't be a murderer. I couldn't let my daughter grow up knowing that her father had the chance to save someone's life and chose not to because he was protecting himself. Nathan reached into his jumpsuit pocket slowly so the guard wouldn't react and pulled out a small photo. He pressed it against the glass. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, with dark curls and a gap-toothed smile. School picture day, judging by the blue backdrop. "This is Emma," Nathan said, his voice breaking. "She's in first grade, loves dinosaurs and SpongeBob and mac and cheese. Every night before bed, she asks me to tell her a story where the hero saves someone. She believes her dad is a good person. He pressed the photo harder against the glass, like he could push it through to me. I needed to actually be that person, just once, even if nobody ever knew, even if it cost me everything. The weight of what he'd done, what he'd sacrificed, settled over me like a heavy blanket. Nathan Cooper had saved my life knowing it would probably destroy his own, had chosen to protect a stranger's life over his daughter's stability, his own freedom, everything he had. I stood up, slowly moved closer to the glass, and pressed my palm against it, where Nathan's hand held the photo. "You saved my life," I said, my voice thick. "Thank you." Nathan's face crumpled. The photo slipped from his fingers as both hands came up to press against the glass where mine rested on the other side. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. "I have to pay for my crimes, Mr. Hartley." He managed through tears. "I know that. The FBI, the DEA, they're going to prosecute me for everything. I'll lose my license. I'll probably spend a year in prison, maybe more. But at least now I can live in peace with myself." He looked at me through the glass, through his tears, and I saw something I hadn't expected to see in a county jail visitation room: redemption. Not forgiveness, not absolution, just a man who'd done something wrong for 2 years, finally doing something right regardless of the cost. "So can I said quietly. 3 months later, the courthouse steps felt steeper than I remembered, or maybe I was simply carrying more weight that morning. January in Seattle meant gray skies and cold rain, the kind that seeped through fabric and settled deep into your bones. I wore my navy dress uniform. I hadn't put it on in 15 years, but it still fit. It felt right, like I was standing not only for myself, but for everyone betrayed by the people they trusted most. Inside, the courtroom was full. Reporters crowded the back rows. Courtroom artists sketched furiously. FBI agents, including Lisa Monroe, sat behind the prosecution. Detective Torres gave me a subtle nod as I entered. And there in the front row sat Olivia, 14 years old, sitting perfectly still, trying very hard to be brave. Judge Ruth Wallace entered, and we all rose. She was in her 60s, gray hair pulled into a severe bun, eyes sharp and unwavering, the kind of judge who had seen humanity at its worst and still believed in accountability. During pretrial hearings, I'd learned she lost her own mother to financial exploitation years earlier. She understood exactly what this case represented. "Please be seated," she said. "We are here for sentencing in the matter of the state of Washington versus Brenda Walsh and Patrick Walsh, and the separate matter of the United States versus Nathan Cooper." The next hour passed in a blur of legal language and measured formality. Victim impact statements were presented. I had submitted mine in writing. I didn't trust myself to read it aloud without breaking. The prosecutor read portions instead about betrayal, about trust, about 8 weeks of deliberate poisoning, and about a daughter who calculated her father's death down to insurance timelines. When Judge Wallace addressed Brenda, her voice was ice. "Brenda Walsh, you are sentenced to 8 years in the Washington State Correctional Facility for Women. You exploited your father's trust, systematically drugged him, and attempted to end his life for financial gain. You showed no remorse, blamed your victim, and attempted to gaslight this court, as you gaslit your father. That ends today." Brenda stared straight ahead. She did not look at me once. "Patrick Walsh," the judge continued, "you are sentenced to 15 years in state prison. Your crimes extended beyond elder abuse. You endangered Mr. Hartley to satisfy gambling debts to organized crime. You involved a medical professional. You calculated murder with precision. Your sentence reflects the severity of your actions and your refusal to accept responsibility." Patrick looked hollow, as if the weight of everything had finally crushed him. Then Nathan Cooper's case was called. The court calls Scott Hartley as a character witness. I stood my legs unsteady and approached the stand. Nathan sat at the defense table looking smaller than I remembered. His public defender met my eyes and nodded. "Mr. Hartley, the prosecutor said you're here to speak on behalf of a man who sold prescription drugs illegally for 2 years. He broke the law," I said. "I won't deny that." But when he was faced with being complicit in murder, he refused. He saved my life knowing it would cost him his career and his freedom. He did it because he's a father trying to be the man his daughter believes he is. Judge Wallace studied me. "Are you suggesting we ignore his crimes?" "No, Your Honor. I'm asking the court to see the full picture. Nathan Cooper made poor choices, but when asked to help kill someone, he found his line. He chose conscience over survival. That choice matters." Silence filled the courtroom. "Mr. Cooper," Judge Wallace said, "you are sentenced to 18 months in county jail with credit for time served. 5 years supervised probation. 2,000 hours of community service. Your pharmacy license is permanently revoked." Nathan exhaled, shoulders sagging in relief. "You received this reduced sentence because you saved a life," the judge continued. "Do not waste this opportunity." "I won't, Your Honor," Nathan said quietly. Then Olivia was called. She walked to the stand slowly, but her voice was steady. She spoke about noticing things didn't add up about being sent to her room when she asked questions. The judge protected her from unnecessary detail. When asked where she wanted to live, Olivia looked directly at me. "With Grandpa, if he'll have me." Judge Wallace reviewed the evaluation and granted custody. Brenda and Patrick were led away in chains. Neither looked back. I felt no triumph, only exhaustion and grief. Outside, reporters swarmed. Olivia slipped her hand into mine. "What happens now?" she whispered. I squeezed her hand gently. "Now we heal, sweetheart. Now we heal." By the summer of 2025, 6 months after those courthouse steps, the house that had once been my nightmare had become something unexpectedly beautiful. The July sun poured through open windows, warming the hardwood floors where Brenda had once served poisoned cake. The dining room where Patrick had eaten his own murder weapon now held a long table surrounded by mismatched chairs, most of them donated, where people could gather without fear. The kitchen smelled of fresh coffee and blueberry muffins Susan had baked before sunrise. The Hartley Mitchell safe house, named for both of us, the man who survived and the nurse who refused to let him die. Susan stood in the living room, adjusting a banner that read, "Welcome Home," painted in Olivia's careful handwriting. She looked different than she had 9 months earlier in that dim parking lot, handing me a button camera and a desperate plan. The exhaustion had faded from her face. She'd found purpose here, directing this place using her nursing skills to help people like her mother, people betrayed by those they trusted most. "They'll be here in 20 minutes, she said, checking her watch. "Are you ready?" I nodded. Our first 2 residents. Margaret, 78, whose son had forged her signature for 3 years, and James, 81, whose daughter-in-law had been overdosing him on sleeping pills while quietly selling his belongings. Both had been rescued by Adult Protective Services. Both needed a safe place to begin again. Both needed what I had needed, people who wanted their time and stories, not their money. "Grandpa." Olivia came downstairs with her laptop under one arm. "The tech corner's ready. 3 iPads charged. She'd turned 17 last month. Finished her college applications and earned a full scholarship to the University of Washington to study social work. The girl who had once been an innocent witness to her parents' crime had decided to spend her life protecting others. I couldn't have been more proud. "Nathan just pulled up," Susan said from the window. I watched him park his old Honda. Emma climbed out beside him, 7 years old now, her gap-toothed smile unchanged. Nathan had been released after 4 months for good behavior, and now served the rest of his sentence on supervised probation. He volunteered here 3 days a week, teaching medication safety and basic chemistry, using his knowledge for something good. Mr. Hartley, he said, shaking my hand. Emma wanted to help with the welcome cookies. Then she needs an apron, I said, ruffling her hair. She laughed and ran into the kitchen where Susan was already setting out bowls. At 2 o'clock, Detective Torres arrived with Margaret and James. I watched them climb the porch steps, carefully holding small suitcases containing what remained of lives damaged by greed. Margaret's hands trembled. James kept glancing behind him. I recognized that fear. Welcome, I said, opening the door wide. You're safe here. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I don't have much money left. My son took. We don't want your money, I said gently. We want you to heal. That's all. At 3 o'clock, we gathered in the backyard for the sign unveiling. Susan had commissioned a local artist to carve it from reclaimed wood, Hartley Mitchell's safe house where family begins again. I'd prepared a short speech. Just the truth. 9 months ago, I sat at a table with people I loved, and they tried to kill me for money. My daughter, my son-in-law, people I trusted completely. They calculated my death down to insurance timelines. I paused, looking at Susan, Nathan, Olivia, Margaret, James, and Detective Torres. That experience taught me something important. Family isn't defined by blood. Family is defined by who shows up when it matters, who risks everything to protect you, who chooses love when there's nothing to gain. I gestured to the house. This place exists because strangers became family. Susan warned me. Nathan saved me. Detective Torres believed me. Dr. Donovan proved it. Olivia stayed when she didn't have to. None of them gained anything. They did it because that's what real family does. Susan wiped her eyes. Nathan lifted Emma onto his shoulders. Olivia stepped beside me and took my hand. So the house that was meant to be sold after my death is now dedicated to rebuilding lives. Not the families people were born into, but the families they choose. I pulled the cord, and the sign swung into the sunlight. Welcome home. Later, as evening settled, I stood on the porch watching Olivia teach Margaret how to use an iPad. The woman laughed as she sent her first email to a granddaughter she'd been kept from. Inside, Nathan helped James organize his medications, explaining labels and dosages. Susan prepared tomorrow's meals, humming softly. On the mantel, Daphne's photo smiled. Beside it sat her chocolate cake recipe, not as a reminder of poison, but of reclamation. My phone buzzed. A message from Detective Torres Marco Rossi, indicted on 47 counts. Patrick cooperated. Justice. Another text followed Mr. Hartley. This is Margaret. Olivia helped me with my phone. Thank you for giving me hope again. I looked through the window at Margaret smiling at her screen like it was a miracle. Maybe it was. Olivia stepped beside me and handed me lemonade. It's really happening. Everything we planned, I said. She leaned against me as laughter echoed through the house. Family isn't blood. Family is choice. And this was a legacy worth leaving. And to you listening to this story, remember this family betrayal cuts deeper than any stranger's knife, because it comes from the hands we trusted to hold us, not harm us. I learned that lesson at 72 years old, sitting at a birthday dinner where my own daughter served me poisoned cake. But I also learned something more important, that God places people in our path exactly when we need them. Susan, Nathan. Detective Torres, none of them were family by blood, but all of them chose to save a stranger's life when they had nothing to gain from it. That's divine intervention wearing human faces. Looking back, I see my mistakes clearly now. I trusted without verifying. I ignored the small warning signs because I didn't want to believe my daughter could change so drastically. I let love blind me to reality. Don't be like me. Don't assume that because someone is family, they have your best interests at heart. Watch for the signs: sudden interest in your finances, attempts to isolate you from friends, unexplained medications, pressure to sign documents you haven't reviewed. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Here's my personal belief earned through 9 months of hell, and healing grandpa stories like mine aren't meant to make you paranoid. They're meant to make you prepared. We elder folks have a responsibility to protect ourselves and each other. We've lived too long, worked too hard, and loved too deeply to let greed destroy what we've built. And for those of you with aging parents or grandparents, remember that your attention is worth more than any inheritance. Call them. Visit them. Know what's happening in their lives. Family betrayal happens in silence and isolation. Your presence is the best prevention. The grandpa stories that matter most aren't the ones about being victimized. They're the ones about surviving, healing, and building something better from the ashes. That's what the Hartley Mitchell Safe House represents. That's what Olivia's decision to study social work represents. That's what Nathan's choice to teach chemistry instead of sell illegal pills represents. Redemption, second chances, grandpa stories about hope. So here's my call to action for you. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about your own family relationships or opened your eyes to elder abuse, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts or your own experiences. Your story might save someone else. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe an elderly neighbor, maybe an adult child who needs a wake-up call. And if you found value in this grandpa story, please subscribe to this channel. There are more stories coming. Stories that might just change your life or save someone you love. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Thank you for listening to an old man's tale of family betrayal and redemption. A final note, the stories on this channel contain fictional elements created for educational purposes. While inspired by real-world issues, characters and specific events are dramatized to illustrate important lessons. If this content isn't for you, please feel free to explore other videos that better suit your preferences. But if you stay, know that every story here is told with one purpose: to protect, to educate, and to remind you that you're never alone. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember, real family is the people who show up when it costs them something. God bless you all.